The blizzard that swallowed Crimson Peak in January of 1885 was the sort of storm folks would speak of in hushed voices for generations. Snow rolled over the plains like a living thing, piling high enough to erase fences, roads, even the familiar curves of the hills. The world felt muted, as if wrapped in thick wool, leaving nothing but the moan of the wind scraping down from the mountains. The town had gone quiet under the white weight, cut off entirely, no wagons creaking in, no train whistles drifting through the cold, no letters arriving to break the solitude. Yet Samuel Mercer stood alone at the depot each day, coat pulled tight, boots half buried in drifts, determined to keep watch when everyone else surrendered to the storm. In his glove he held a soft-edged letter, worn from being unfolded so many times the paper felt like cloth. Its words were the only warmth he had left, a promise written in careful strokes from a woman he had never met, but already felt tethered to. A child's small voice broke the monotony of the wind. "Pa!" Sarah's call always carried more weight than her tiny frame suggested. She trudged through the snow, wrapped awkwardly in her late mother's shawl, its faded fringe brushing the ground as she moved. Her nose was pink from the cold, and her blue eyes, too wise for 6 years, searched her father's face with a quiet ache. "She's not coming, is she, Pa?" she whispered, her breath fogging the air between them. Samuel crouched to meet her gaze, brushing snow from her hair as gently as if it were glass. "She meant to," he murmured, voice thick with hope and fear. "She left California before the storms." Sarah's lips trembled. "Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe she doesn't want to be my new Ma." Samuel's jaw tightened as he stared at the snow-strangled road, not answering right away. "No, sweetheart," he said finally. "If she didn't come, something stopped her." That night, the livery doors burst open, sending a swirl of icy air into the lantern-lit room as a wagon driver stumbled inside, half frozen and barely standing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He'd come from Black Creek, where the trail was carved by danger even on a good day. Samuel pushed forward, heart clawing at his ribs. "You drove the party from California?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man nodded, shivering violently. "Wagon tipped, crossing the creek. Ice split under us," he rasped. Samuel felt the world tilt. "Was there a young Chinese woman with your group?" "Milin." The driver squinted, brow furrowing as if reaching back through blurred memories. "Quiet girl, brown eyes, wore red," he muttered. "Yeah, she was with us. But once that wagon went down, everything turned to chaos. Folks scattered. Some got hurt. Some walked off to find help." The words cut through Samuel like a blade, too vague to soothe, too real to ignore. That night, after Sarah had fallen asleep clutching her doll, he sat alone in the barn, lantern flickering over the letter in his lap. Her final line echoed in his mind. "If your heart is kind and your daughter in need of warmth, perhaps I can make a life there." A rustle behind him made him look up. Sarah stood there barefoot, wrapped in a quilt far too large for her tiny shoulders. Her eyes glimmered with something between fear and trust. "You're going to find her, aren't you?" she asked softly. Samuel took a long breath, then nodded. "If she's out there, hurt, lost, I have to try," he said, brushing her cheek with the back of his hand. At dawn he saddled Boulder, his strongest horse, loading the beast with blankets, rope, dried meat, medicine, and a lantern. He tucked Milin's letter against his chest, close enough to feel it shift with every breath. The sheriff met him at the edge of town, hat low against the wind. "You're walking into death, Samuel. That storm'll swallow you whole," he warned. "Then I'll ride faster." Samuel replied, refusing to look back. "You've got a little girl to think about," the sheriff pressed. Samuel tightened the cinch on Boulder's saddle. "That's exactly why I'm going." When Sarah ran to him, tears streaking her cheeks, he lifted her into his arms. "Pa, don't let the snow take you," she begged. He kissed her forehead. "I'll come back, and if Miss Milin is out there, I'll bring her home." Then, with the storm rising around him, he rode into the blinding white. Samuel rode into a world transformed into silence, a vast white wilderness where even sound seemed frozen in place. His breath rose in pale clouds, disappearing instantly into the cold that clung to him like a second skin. The lantern swinging from his saddle sent weak circles of light ahead, its glow swallowed quickly by the endless drifts. By the second day, the blizzard finally loosened its grip, leaving behind a brittle stillness that felt almost eerie after so much howling wind. Late in the afternoon, he spotted something, a crooked ranger station half buried in snow, its roof sagging but smoke curling faintly from the chimney. The sight of it struck him with a jolt of hope, sharper than any warmth. He dismounted, boots sinking deep as he pushed open the warped door. Inside, 4 weary travelers huddled around a failing fire, their faces drawn tight with cold and fear. "I'm searching for someone," Samuel said, voice hoarse from the cold. A Chinese woman, Milin, an older woman with soft eyes, leaned forward, recognition flickering across her features. "You're the one she was headed to, aren't you?" she asked gently. Samuel nodded, hands clenched at his sides. The woman motioned for him to sit, though he remained standing, heart hammering. "She was with us after the wagon rolled," the woman said, her voice steady but heavy. "She kept calm, soothed the injured, even pulled a boy out from under a broken board before checking herself." Samuel closed his eyes briefly, imagining the woman he had only known through ink and careful handwriting, now moving bravely through chaos. "Where is she now?" he whispered. The woman hesitated. "She went out for help, but she turned north, took the wrong ridge. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't hear it." Samuel thanked them and stepped back outside, the cold slamming into him like a wall. He didn't need rest, not while she was out there alone. He rode deeper into the timberline, searching for any trace of her, his eyes constantly scanning the snow for signs too faint for anyone else to spot. Hours later, he finally found something, a shred of red silk caught on a thorny branch, fluttering weakly in the wind. It was the color she had described in her letters, a fabric from home she treasured. Nearby, faint impressions marred the untouched snow, small footprints leading deeper into the trees. His pulse quickened as he followed the trail until Boulder suddenly stopped, ears pinned, breath steaming hard. On the snow ahead was a thin smear of blood and a small leather pouch half buried. Samuel slid from the saddle, hands trembling as he picked it up. Inside was a worn book of poetry and a folded slip of paper in her handwriting. "Samuel Mercer, Crimson Peak. I hope I will be worthy to be your wife." The note blurred as tears filled his eyes. "I'm coming, Milin," he whispered into the wind. The tracks led him toward the ravine, where the remains of the wagon lay splintered and twisted beneath a boulder, debris strewn like the bones of some great beast. There were no bodies, no signs of life, only silence and cold. But another thread of red silk clung stubbornly to a branch, pointing him forward. A few feet beyond, the snow showed marks, not footprints, but the dragging lines of someone crawling. His breath caught. He followed the trail to a shallow creek bed, where at first he saw only a mound of snow. Then a shape emerged beneath it, small fingers curled weakly above the drift. "No," he breathed, dropping to his knees as he uncovered her. Milin lay half-buried, skin pale as the snow around her, lips tinged blue, breath so faint he feared it might stop at any second. "Don't you quit on me," Samuel whispered, wrapping her in his coat, lifting her carefully against his chest. When her lips moved and a faint sound shaped his name, his heart nearly split. He rose with her in his arms and began the desperate trek toward shelter, refusing to let the wilderness take her. Samuel pushed through the trees with Milin cradled against him, her weight far too light, her breath barely brushing his collarbone. The forest blurred around him, branches clawing his coat as he moved with a strength born not from muscle, but from fear and devotion. Just when his legs threatened to buckle, he spotted the faint outline of an old trapper's cabin slumped beneath a drift of snow. Hope struck him like a spark. He shouldered through the frozen door, letting it crash inward, and carried her straight to a pile of musty pelts near the hearth. His hands shook as he laid her down, his own chest rising and falling in frantic waves. The cold inside the cabin bit at his bones, but he pushed it aside, searching frantically through the room for anything that could help. When he found a rusted tin of flint and a bundle of brittle moss, he dropped to his knees and forced a flame to life. The small fire flickered weakly, but even that faint glow painted her pale face with a hint of warmth. He stripped away her frozen garments, wrapping her in his dry shirt and every pelt he could gather from the corners of the cabin. Her forehead burned beneath his palm despite the cold. Fever had already begun its climb, a cruel battle waged inside her frail body. He rummaged through abandoned shelves until he uncovered a jar of dried willow bark, brittle but still fragrant when crushed between his fingers. He melted clean snow, brewed the bark into a bitter tincture, and lifted her head gently to let a few drops pass her lips. "Come back to me, Milin," he whispered, brushing away wet strands of hair that clung to her cheek. Hours dragged by, marked only by the crackle of the fire, and Samuel's quiet prayers spoken into the dim air. Then, at last, a soft cough broke the suffocating silence, so faint Samuel almost doubted he heard it. Her eyelids fluttered, her gaze unfocused but alive, and the relief that slammed through him left him trembling. "Samuel," she croaked, voice like paper tearing. "You're safe now," he murmured, kneeling beside her, letting her lean weakly against his shoulder. She blinked slowly, fighting to stay awake. "I didn't mean for it to be so hard," she whispered, each word a tremor of exhaustion and apology. Samuel shook his head, brushing his thumb over her temple. "Don't apologize for surviving," he replied softly. "Not ever." Silence settled again, gentler this time, warmed by the fire's glow and the quiet rhythm of her breathing. Eventually, he spoke again, voice low, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace. "My daughter's name is Sarah. She's 6, stubborn as a mule but kind as spring rain." Milin's lips curved faintly. "I always wondered if she'd like me." Samuel swallowed hard, looking down at her with an ache he couldn't hide. "She hoped you'd smile more than her mama did," he said softly. "I think you already do." A low growl outside shattered the moment, seeping through the cracks of the shutters like a warning carried on the wind. Samuel rose instantly, muscles tense, hand reaching for the rifle propped against the wall. Through the narrow gap, he glimpsed eyes glinting in the snow-dark woods, wolves drawn by the scent of weakness and fire. He helped Milin into the farthest corner, shielding her behind a stack of crates. Her trembling fingers caught his sleeve. "You won't leave me," she breathed. Samuel knelt, pressing his forehead briefly to hers. "I'll stand between you and whatever comes," he promised. When the wind stilled, the wolves advanced, shadows gliding across the clearing. Samuel fired a warning shot, the blast piercing the frozen air. Most of the wolves retreated, but one huge beast lunged, launching itself at him before he could raise the rifle. They crashed into the snow in a tangle of teeth and fury, the wolf's jaws ripping through his shoulder as he fought to keep it from his throat. And from the corner of the cabin, Milin gathered the last strength she had left, not to flee, but to fight. Milin's limbs trembled with weakness, but her spirit surged with a fierce clarity as she watched the wolf tear into Samuel. She staggered toward the hearth, grabbing a heavy iron ladle with fingers stiff from cold. Her eyes darted to a rusted barrel in the corner, and she seized its wooden lid, raising it with both hands. With every ounce of strength she possessed, she slammed the lid down against the barrel's rim, creating a thunderous metallic crack that echoed through the cabin like gunfire. Again and again she struck, each blow splintering the silence with unnatural noise. The pack outside hesitated, ears flattening as the clamor rattled the night. The wolf attacking Samuel jerked its head, startled by the sound, giving Samuel the window he needed. Blood seeped through his torn coat as he pushed against the beast, and with a final heave, the wolf broke away and bolted into the darkness after its retreating packmates. Milin's knees gave out, the lid slipping from her hands as she collapsed in exhaustion. Samuel dragged himself across the floor to reach her, pain blazing through his shoulder, breath shaking from fear and relief. "Why would you do that?" he whispered, gathering her against him, feeling how cold her small frame had become. "You could have been hurt. You should have stayed hidden." Milin's voice quivered, barely more than a breath. "You were out there alone. I couldn't just lie there. Her lashes fluttered, exhaustion tugging at her like a tide she could no longer resist. Samuel pressed his forehead to hers, gripping her hand as though anchoring them both to life. "Don't ever scare me like that again," he murmured, voice breaking. "I thought I was going to lose you." When the danger had finally passed, he returned her to the nest of pelts, stoked the fire until sparks danced up the chimney, and wrapped his own coat over her shoulders. The warmth returned slowly, colour rising faintly in her cheeks as her breathing steadied. Only then did Samuel tend to his own wound, binding it with strips torn from his undershirt. Hours later, as the storm quieted and the fire cast gentle shadows across the cabin walls, Samuel reached into his pocket and retrieved the scrap of torn red silk he had found snagged on the bush earlier. "This is yours," he whispered, holding it between fingers that were raw from cold and exertion. He found a slender bone needle in the cabin's old supplies and threaded it with coarse string, stitching slowly and carefully despite the tremor in his injured arm. Milin watched him through half-lidded eyes, her expression softening with something deeper than gratitude. "What are you doing?" she asked quietly. "Mending what I can." Samuel replied, not looking up. "So, you'll remember the day I found you, and how hard you fought to stay alive." When he handed the sewn piece to her, her fingers traced the uneven seam, her eyes shimmering with unspoken emotions. "I'm not the woman you think I am," she whispered. "I have no dowry, no family name, and nothing to offer." Samuel reached out, placing her hand over his heart, letting the steady beat beneath her palm speak what words could not. "What I saw," he murmured, "was a woman who walked into a storm to keep her word. A woman who faced fear and loneliness and still kept going." His voice softened, warm as the fire beside them. "I fell for the heart inside every letter you wrote. That's the part of you I cherish." Tears filled her eyes, slipping down her cheeks as she leaned gently against him, finally letting herself rest without fear of judgment or abandonment. Outside, the wind seemed to soften, no longer a predator but a distant reminder of the world still waiting beyond the door. And inside the weather-beaten cabin, the fragile beginnings of trust, of home, warmed the air between them. By dawn, the storm had quieted fully, and Samuel knew it was time to return to Crimson Peak, not with loss in his arms, but with the woman he had nearly crossed death to find. Together they stepped into the pale morning light, the long journey home finally beginning.